views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey, this is Despina and this is Modern Odyssey on BronxNet and beyond. Today we're going to talk about music for film and TV. Our guest today is a Brazilian of Greek descent whose music career led him to New York. He has scored music for films and TV shows, and he has worked with executive producer Steven Spielberg and directors such as Robert De Niro and Denzel Washington. He's been twice nominated for Primetime Emmy Awards, and he's the composer of the film Dark Waters, released in American theaters in November 2019. Marcelo Zarvos, welcome to our show.
Hello, Despina. Very nice to be here.
Thank you for having us here today in your studio.
It's a real pleasure.
You know, I watched last week your film, and it was really interesting. Dark Waters, it's about environmental justice and all these great actors. And of course, your music was amazing.
Thank you.
And, you know, when I saw your name, it looked to me so Greek. And I really want to get you on the show and discuss more about music and your work. So you told me that you have a Greek background. Your grandfather was Greek, right?
That's right. My grandfather, his name was Nicolaou, and he came from Rhodes to Brazil when he was 12 years old. He was an immigrant. He came with his brother who was 14. They came by themselves. They were so poor that not even the whole family couldn't come, so it was part of large immigration that actually he was meant to come to the United States, but and then that didn't quite work out, and then he wanted to go to Argentina, but then the boat stopped in Brazil before he got to Argentina, and he got off, and that was it. So it was accidentally he made his life in Brazil.
So how does it feel to be Greek outside of Greece?
You know, I didn't really realize what it meant until I only really heard a lot of stories and Greek stories about my relatives and my grandfather and Rhodes. But when I visited Greece, I had a chance to visit Greece a few times, and I really felt a real kinship with the place and the people. And even though I don't speak the language, I felt a real affinity and something very, very deep, you know, about the Greek people. And I think obviously Brazilians share also a Latin heritage, but there was something that runs even deeper, and it really reminded me of Brazil a lot, and how people are and how people live their lives, and the idea of family and a lot of things that feel very, very similar and consistent with Brazilian values.
That's right. And how did you decide to become a composer? What does music mean to you?
I started playing the piano. That was the first thing that I wanted to do, was to figure out a way to play the piano. But shortly after, I fell in love with music through the music of the films, and the films of my childhood, 80s films really, Spielberg movies, and also films like Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire, who happened to have the great Greek composer Vangelis composing for both of those scores, Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire, scores that I listened to hundreds of times, and I didn't really understand even at that point even what that meant, and that there were people that did music for films, but I just knew that I loved the music, and I loved how the music made me feel things. And even when I listened to the music outside of the film, it still reminded me of the film and kind of made me have that experience again, and that's how I fell in love with music.
Do you have any relatives in your family?
Who are musicians?
Who are musicians? Yeah.
Not really. My family, there were no musicians. I mean, I have a dear cousin who played the piano, and who I remember that was my inspiration, was watching him play the piano. But my family they were not. I mean, my father couldn't understand. He said that it was like genetically impossible for me to be a musician because they say that it runs in family. So I don't know. I guess somehow it popped up, in my genes somehow.
But would you encourage your children work on music?
Very much so, yeah. My oldest child, his name is Julian, and he's almost 10, and he's been playing piano since he's 4, and he's really into it and really, really enjoys it.
So why do you think it's important to have music education, not only if you want to pursue music career, but also, at school?
Well, other than how I personally feel about music, I mean, it feels like every week a new study comes out saying what the amazing impact that music has in the brain and in the developing brain, and reading music, playing music, any kind of music making. And so I feel like it's crucial that that kids can have access to it. And I think regardless of what they're going to do with it, I think just having a little bit of an experience, and there's like the brain side and also the emotional side that I feel like it's really allowing children to express their emotions, early on. Mm-hmm. And also you also have when children play together in groups, bands, orchestras, whatever it is, there's this sense of collaboration and cooperation that is really amazing in a similar way to team sports, what team sports do. And music does that too. So I feel like every angle that you look at, it's a positive thing that a child has access to music education.
To develop other skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And what is the most challenging part about being a musician?
Well, it's probably kind of, in a way, the most mundane too, which is, to make a living and like knowing, essentially most musicians are freelancers, and I'm certainly like that too. So you're always, you're very busy, and then you're not busy, and like that kind of the ups and downs of any kind of career, and also just emotionally, sometimes you have a lot to put out, and sometimes you're very tired, but I think the kind of irregularity of it is probably one of the big challenges, and also trying to have the faith that it's going to work out and that things will either get back in track or that they will happen somehow.
And what is the most rewarding experience about being a musician?
I think it's just communicating emotions to people and that kind of spiritual connection. I find music to be a very, very spiritual thing, and when people are watching a movie and they are moved by the movie and the music, and they'll come to me later and talk, wow, this made me feel certain things, and feel like, and same thing when I'm doing music that is not for film and it's just concert music, like feeling like you're being part of somebody's emotional experience. I find that to be a really incredible thing that, people can exchange sort of energy, if you will, with people that you don't know, sometimes people on the other side of the world that you never met, but they're somehow being affected by it. And I feel like as a musician, you're in turn affected yourself about how people get affected by your music, and it becomes kind of like a cycle that's definitely for me what, in a nutshell, is the most amazing thing.
So consciously or unconsciously, there is always a connection through music.
Through music and through emotion, really,
and
through music and through sound, and yeah.
And when do you feel most inspired to compose music?
I don't really. Some people I hear they have like a time that they're really morning person, or I think if I was left to my own devices, I didn't have young children, I probably would be writing all night long. That's kind of my natural. But since I have kids, I have to wake up very early. So I've taught myself to become more of a daytime morning person. But I think one of the great things with working with film is that there are very set schedules and set deadlines. So you have to kind of just do it, and you learn. I've been doing it for many years. You learn to kind of train yourself to just work when you have the time.
And what themes do inspire your creativity? Are there any specific, themes that you feel more inspired to compose music for?
Themes in terms of like in stories, you mean, or
yeah, or human stories, or emotions, or like the film Dark Waters that we're going to discuss more about it.
I think stories in general are what inspire me. I've always been very interested. I remember even before I was into music, I loved stories, and I think a lot of kids like stories. They like to be told stories, and I think it's one of the ways that we let our imagination run.
Yeah.
And even before I started, I was able to write film music. I used to write music sometimes based on books that I read, and that I would like somehow that it would inspire me to write a piece of music. And I think I was kind of practicing to write film music for film. And also one thing that is very specific about New York, I find walking around the streets of New York, taking the subway, all of that, to be very inspiring. I find it very, seeing people and imagining, each of these people has like a story and has like all these things that they're going through. And I find that, again, that exchange of energy that happens when you maybe just walk by somebody on the street and you look at them and they look at you, and you're never going to see them again, but it feels like there's
The energy.
The energy is very inspiring to me.
Yeah. And to what extent has your music developed over the years?
I think my music has become probably more cosmopolitan from being in New York for so long. I've been here for almost 30 years, and I feel like that's one of the, New York, you're exposed to a lot of music from all over the world, and you have like every culture, or many, many cultures anyways, represented here. And I think my music became probably, when I lived here, more cosmopolitan and also more American. I feel like American music, at first, the biggest source of influence for me was music of films and then Brazilian music too. But I feel like over time, American music, American classical music and jazz and all of that has become just as much a part of who I am since I've been here now for most of my life.
Yeah, and you've been twice awarded with Primetime Awards, right? And
I've been nominated.
Nominated.
Yeah, nominated for Primetime Emmys, yes.
Nominated.
But I'm working on it.
What were the films that you've been working and they were nominated?
The first film was called Taking Chance. It was a wonderful film with Kevin Bacon, a great actor, and who I've grew up watching his movies. It was really, really exciting to score a movie. Now, Footloose was like, that is definitely like my childhood. That was like the movie of my childhood. And also, he was very interesting also because he's a musician himself, and his brother, Michael Bacon, is a very accomplished film composer that does what I do. We've met over the years, that had to do with a Marine officer who's in the U.S. Marines, who decides to accompany the body of a fallen soldier who dies in Iraq back to his family in the Midwest. And it's a very, very, very sad but very beautiful, emotional story. And there was very little dialogue in it, so the music really had to carry a lot of the movie. And it was a really wonderful, wonderful experience. A very emotional film. And also one of my favorite human stories. I feel like I gravitate a lot of times for this kind of sadder stories. I think my music just works good for that. And the second time I was nominated was for a film called You Don't Know Jack, starring Al Pacino, and it was a biopic about Jack Kevorkian, who was also known as Dr. Death, and this guy who helped people commit suicide when they're very sick, and was a very controversial figure, but ultimately a very fascinating character.
So Dark Waters, that it's now in American theaters, it's based on a true story.
Yes, very much so.
And I would like to ask you, what inspired you most when writing the music for the film?
Sometimes you work on films and you're in it because of the artistry of it and because of the storytelling. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you work on a film where that's out there, but then the message of the film really resonates with you. And that was the case with Dark Waters. It's a story of environmental justice, son of a whistleblower, a lawyer, played by Mark Ruffalo, who takes on this giant company, DuPont. And it's kind of a David and Goliath story, and I found it just extremely inspiring. And I think in some ways, as artists, we are very inspired by stories like that, of people that just, against all odds, decide do something that seems impossible, and for the right reasons, he was doing that to help somebody and ultimately help an entire town and probably the entire world in a way of letting us know what was happening there. And so the story, the idea of environmental justice is very, very close to my heart. I find that something that is everywhere that you look at, it feels to me like we are in a real crisis across the board. And it's nice when there are stories about people that have been able to change and move the dial a little bit in a positive direction, which certainly is the case of Dark Waters, even though it's a story that's still unfolding. It certainly, I think it already has created awareness about these chemicals and all of this thing that happened in this town in West Virginia, and hopefully over time, many people are going to watch this movie and find out about this really very shocking, but very true and very necessary story to be told.
Mm-hmm. How important is it to keep your values in the workplace?
Very important. I think that's all that we that we have. We have to, I don't believe in that idea of that, when you're at work you should be a monster and try to beat everybody and just be very contentious. I always believe that with goodwill and generosity, the best things come in life, and I feel like I try to bring that value to my workplace every day.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
And how did you come to compose the music for Dark Waters?
I came to work on Dark Waters through the picture editor. Was a collaborator and friend of mine who I had worked over the years many times from the very beginning of my career. The first feature film I did after having done a few short films was a film called Tully, and he brought me in to do that project. And later I did a film called Door in the Floor that was very important in my career. It was a film with Jeff Bridges and Kim Basinger, and it was the first studio film I worked on. And then later he kind of introduced me to Todd Haynes. So this guy, his name is Afonso Gonçalves, is a very, very talented, amazing picture editor, and he really believes in my music, and we've had a great time collaborating, and he introduced me to Todd Haynes, and Todd Haynes really loved my music. He had heard my music from other films and was very fond of it, and the opportunity came to work on Dark Waters, and I was, before he even said, "Would you like to?" I already said yes. I was thrilled.
So this sounds like a combination of hard work and good luck.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's always key. They say that luck is important, but you have to be prepared for when those opportunities come. And it's certainly, I found that I've had some really, really great, lucky things that happened in my life and my career. And luckily I had worked hard to be prepared for it. And when the time came, even if it was, it can be very overwhelming to think you're going to score a movie, and it always feels a little scary. Even now, after having done so many, I still, in the beginning, I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Is this, and you always have this feeling that, they're going to find out that you really have no idea what you're doing, and it's this feeling that I think a lot of artists have. But I think, just working hard and kind of trying to be prepared and trying to do your homework is key.
Yeah, because sometimes people think that there is a key to success, but is there a key, or is it just hard work?
I think it's hard work. I think luck plays a role in it, and I think without some luck, there are incredible artists all over the world that don't get to exercise their profession because they haven't had the opportunity. So I definitely think that's a factor, but I feel like hardworking. I've always been a hard worker and really believe in work ethic and being sort of the first to get to work, the last to leave, and kind of just not taking no for an answer.
Yeah. And what was your approach on the film Dark Waters?
One of the things that Todd Haynes really wanted was to portray this idea of the singular fight, a fight of one person against this big, powerful entity. And so he really wanted to have the piano. He really thought that the piano would be the great sort of metaphor for that. And one of the most challenging parts of the film was that he, in the sort of the climax of the film, he wanted it to be just a solo piano piece. It takes 9 minutes, and it's when the character Robert Lott figures out what's happening and what this chemical and Teflon and all of this stuff, we call that piece the Teflon connection. And he, even though the rest of the score is quite thick with orchestras and strings and lots of electronic sounds, for that big climactic moment, he wanted to kind of take it down to this very naked and kind of bare kind of texture of the music. And kind of like the only thing I think of, like when you see like a great actor and they want to command your attention and they speak very quietly. And you have to really pay attention. And I think he wanted the music to do that, the music to become very quiet. So you have to kind of lean in to really figure it out with this character what's going on. And it was quite challenging. I'd never had to do such a long piece with just a piano, and it was fun. But we recorded it right here over a few days, and that particular piece is the one that really took a disproportionate amount of time. It's also about almost 25% of the score, so it was a big chunk of the music of the film.
So have you been composing the music while the film was shooting?
No, I came in when they were already editing. They were
Okay.
done with the shooting and they had been editing. It was a very accelerated process, so I had to do it very, very fast. I had like 3 weeks to write the score, which is a lot of music to write for not a lot of time. But also there was the good side of that, which is everybody's on the same page, and I had real artistic affinity with Tom Haynes, and we really hit it off creatively, and he really believed in what I was doing.
And what is your advice to aspiring musicians?
I would say the main thing is like persevere. I think my experience now, after being in this business for a long time, is that the people that I think are able to make it are the people that just persevere. And that's, I think from also working a lot in film and seeing directors trying to create films from scratch, which I find that unbelievable. Sometimes directors, even a director, somebody as famous as Robert De Niro, it took him 12 years to do The Good Shepherd. 12 years that he just really was, and that's like a major star that the whole world knows. And I see many times directors that will be working on a single project for 5-6 years and just really focus. And so I've always found that to be very inspiring. As a musician, not to say what I do is easy, but I don't have to come up with millions of dollars and a crew of like a couple hundred people to do a piece of mine. And I find, that directors are very inspiring that way. But I feel like in whatever area of the arts, and certainly music, I think perseverance and also having faith and in your own voice. I think I see a lot of times people try to they feel like they have to do a certain thing and copy a certain sound or a certain style. And I think what I see the most translate into success, it's a combination of perseverance and also individuality. I think people want to know the specific style or whatever that specific person has to offer. And I think that's my advice for people, to try to figure out who you are inside and what makes you unique.
That's very important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Marcelo, for having us here today.
Thank you, Despina. It's really nice to be here. It's a real pleasure talking to you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing story. And thank you so much for sharing BronxNet Modern Odyssey. Do you know how to say bye in Greek?
No, tell me. Is it well?
Yeses.
Yeses,
Yeah.
right? Yeses. Okay.
Yeses.
Okay.
So yeses.
Yeses.